Welcome to this BSPARI element brief training on graphical displays and analysis, presented by DBHDS Behavior Network Supports. The purpose of this training is to support behaviorists providing therapeutic behavioral consultation through the waiver system, and their efforts to navigate the DBHDS DMAS Practice Guidelines for Behavior Support Plans and the accompanying Behavior Support Plan Adherence Review Instrument. Participants of this training will describe graphical displays and analysis and their benefits in behavioral science, become familiar with areas addressing graphical displays and analysis in the DBHDS DMAS Practice Guidelines for Behavior Support Plans and BSPARI elements, identify examples and non-examples of plans meeting the relevant BSPARI elements, and access research articles and other resources on graphical displays and analysis. The key component of behavior science is measuring behavior change through direct and repeated observation and using the data obtained from these measurements as the foundation for analysis. The behavioral data obtained through therapeutic behavioral consultation services provide the empirical basis to answer important questions in behavior support planning. For instance, is the intervention decreasing problem behavior and increasing replacement behavior? Do elements of the behavior support plan need to be adjusted? And are there variables outside of the BSP contributing to behavior change? Determining the answers to these behavior support planning questions using raw data would be difficult and unreliable. Graphical displays are the major device used in behavioral science to organize, store, and interpret data. There are a wide range of graphical displays at a behaviorist's disposal, each with their own unique utilities and limitations. The simple line graph is the most widely used graphical display in behavioral science and will be the focus of this training. The simple line graph consists of two axes. The horizontal axis, known as the x-axis, typically represents the passage of time and changes in treatment. And the vertical axis, or y-axis, typically represents measurement of a specific behavior. Unlike some other types of graphical displays like bar graphs and pie graphs, simple line graphs allow behaviorists to analyze the fundamental properties of behavior change over time, level, trend, and variability. And generally speaking, line graphs are the most effective means to illustrate behavior change. Here are a few benefits of graphical displays of behavioral data. First, graphing raw data as it becomes available allows the behaviorist immediate access to an ongoing visual record of the individual's behaviors. And graphical displays conducive to visual analysis, like a simple line graph, allows the behaviorist to observe variations in behavior as they occur. And graphical displays aid behaviorists in interpreting treatment results and are a conservative method of determining significant behavior change. And finally, a well-designed graphical display is widely understood and enables a behaviorist to effectively communicate behavior changes to the individual receiving services and their support team. The DBHDS DMAS Practice Guidelines for Behavior Support Plans outline the required content areas and associated minimum elements for behavioral programming through the Therapeutic Consultation Waiver Service. The practice guidelines require data analysis through an appropriate graphical display for behaviors targeted for decrease and the behaviors targeted for increase, subsequent to completion of the FBA and launching of the BSP. Additionally, graphic displays with progress summaries covering at least the current review period are required for annual therapeutic consultation behavioral services authorizations. See the complete practice guidelines on the DBHDS Behavioral Services website. DBHDS has created the Behavior Support Plan Adherence Review Instrument, or BSPARI, to capture the minimum BSP content areas and minimum elements for those BSP content areas as outlined in the practice guidelines. The required minimum elements for graphical displays are as follows. Visual display for each behavior targeted in the plan. A plan will earn the two possible checks when graphical displays are present for each behavior targeted for decrease and the behaviors targeted for increase. And one check will be given when some, but not all, targeted behaviors have graphical displays. And no checks will be given when no graphs are present. The next minimum requirement in this section is that there must be a summary statement present for each graph. A plan will earn the two possible checks when summary statements are provided that provide progress information about each behavior displayed. And one check will be given when there is a summary statement for some, but not all behaviors displayed. And no check will be given when there are no summary statements made available. The next requirement is that graphs have indicators that demonstrate decision-making and analysis is occurring based on the behavior trends and the revision dates of the plans. A plan will earn the two possible checks when all graphs present have visual indicators, or the graphs indicate desired responding. So for instance, a behavior targeted for decrease with a steady downward trend. And one check will be given when visual indicators are present for some, but not all graphs, based on behavior trends and the revision dates. And no check will be given when there are no visual indicators, and again, this is based on behavior trends and the revision dates. The last two required minimum elements for graphical displays are as follows. Graphs represent the entire necessary review period, and if any data is absent, indication is given to why. And graphs demonstrate the data review is occurring monthly if restraint or timeout is included. The full scoring criteria for these elements of the BSPARI are available for your review on this chart and in the BSPARI document on the Behavior Services website. The graphical displays and analysis portion of the plan must meet these criteria to be considered in compliance with this element of the practice guidelines. Next, we will use fictional data to present examples and non-examples of plans adhering to the required minimum elements for graphical displays and analysis, starting with a non-example. For instructional purposes, this fictional plan under review targets one behavior for decrease, aggression, and one behavior for increase, a functional communication response of requesting a break. The graphical display shown here was the only graph made available for review. Using the scoring criteria on the BSPARI shown on the previous slides, this plan scores one of the two possible checks for visual displays for each behavior targeted in the BSP, as there is only one graph for the behavior targeted for decrease and no graphical display for the behavior targeted for increase. This plan scores an X for summary statements, as there is no summary statement present for the one graph made available for review. This plan also scores an X for indicators that demonstrate decision-making and/or analysis is occurring, because there are no indicators on this graph, despite the trends and level indicating this behavior targeted for decrease is increasing. And the plan did not earn a point for the graphs representing the entire necessary review period, as there is a large gap in the data path and no reason was provided for the missing data. We can see that this plan scored one of the 5 possible points in the graphical display and analysis section of the BSPARI. Now let's look at an example of a plan adhering to the required elements in this section. Remember, the fictional plan under review targets one behavior for decrease, aggression, and one behavior for increase, a functional communication response of requesting a break. Using the scoring criteria on the BSPARI, this plan scores both checks for visual displays for each behavior targeted in the BSP, as there is a graph for each behavior targeted for decrease and each behavior targeted for increase. This plan scores both checks for summary statements, as there are summary statements present for each graph made available for review. This plan scores both checks for indicators that demonstrate decision-making and/or analysis is occurring, because the graphical displays include a phase change line with labeled conditions and arrows indicating significant life events. And the plan also earns the one possible check for graphs representing the entire necessary review period, because a reason is provided for the missing data. In this case, the individual was hospitalized. We can see that this plan scored 5 of the possible 5 points in this section of the BSPARI addressing graphical displays and analysis, and the plan is in adherence with the practice guidelines. Here are some additional resources for providers relevant to graphical displays and analysis. Hyperlinks to these resources are located under the Resources tab in the BSPARI document, which is available for download on the Behavioral Services website under Quality Reviews. Thank you for viewing this BSPARI Element Brief Training on Graphical Displays and Analysis.